Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the infamous Sylvia's channel where we reenact the court case of Mr. Robert Sylvester Kelly, which is a Northern District of Illinois case where he is on trial with two other defendants. Without further ado, we have my readers for today. We have Miss Dallas and Mr. Brandon.
Hello.
Hey guys.
We have our clerk, which is powerful. And we have Mr. Brentley, which is Tamiria. Hey.
Hi, everybody.
All right, guys, we're going to get started. Let us roll. We're going to start at page 3100. 3100 people.
Wait, what's my part?
You're going to be Appeget, Appentegg.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let me start this part so I can get down to 3100.
Okay.
United States of America versus Robert Sylvester Kelly, aka R. Kelly, Darrell McDavid, and Milton Brown, aka June Brown. September 7th, 2022, 2 p.m.
Everybody's at 3100?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
I'm
let's
not
get.
ready, y'all, because I'm trying to find which one it is. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Oh, Lord. Okay, I'll read until you get to that point.
Okay, all right, let's get the jury in. We'll get going another 20 minutes. Do it. Jury in. Please be seated. Mr.
No,
Brantley, you may continue.
thank you, Your Honor. Derrel McDavid, defendant herein previously sworn direct examination resumed. Mr. McDavid, just to take a step back and reorientate ourselves with where we were, who is this? Who is it that you said Mr. Palladino identified as the person who introduced Tiffany Hawkins to Susan Logan?
Demetrius Smith.
Okay. And then you said that in January 2001, you received report of interviews that Jack Palladino did with someone named Asante Watkins. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And did the report that you received from Mr. Mongolis prepared by Mr. Palladino, did those impact your belief about whether people making allegation of underage sex with Mr. Kelly were being truthful or not?
Yes.
I'm going to direct your attention, Mr. McDavid, in the binder in front of you, the defendant exhibit 1, 2, and 3. I'd like you to take a look at those. One,
One, two, and three.
yes.
You don't need me to read the whole thing, right?
No, you've reviewed these prior to testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, Exhibit 1, 2, and 3. Do you recognize all of these of the three of those?
Yes.
And were all the three of those provided to you by Jerry Mangolis?
Yes, sir.
Are all three of those documents authorized by Jack Palladino?
Yes.
And Mr. McDavid, did all three of these documents, when you reviewed them, let me ask you this. Did you review them at or around the time that they were created in January 2001?
Yes, sir.
And did these exhibit 1, 2, and 3 impact your belief? Did their content impact your beliefs about whether the people making underage sex claim about Robert Kelly were telling truth or lying?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brentley. All right. I'm sorry. All right. At this time, Judge, I would ask that to admit this into evidence, defendant exhibit 1, 2, 3, or 4, the impact they had on Mr. McDavid.
Your Honor, the government objects for the reasons we stated. May we have a sidebar to discuss per your ruling?
All right, quickly. Proceeding at the sidebar on the record. Here. Redactment, 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 redactment. End of discussion at sidebar. I guess they'll admit it. Defense Exhibit 1, 2, and 3 were received in evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge, we addressed it at sidebar later. It's fine.
If I can get the document camera, please. Mr. McDavid, I'm first going to draw your attention to Defendant's Exhibit David 1. Is this one of the reports you received from Jerry McGarlis that was authored by Chuck Palladino?
Yes.
I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on.
You sound muffled too.
I sound muffled? Okay, hold on. How's that? Is it better?
Yes.
And is this regarding interviews that Jack did of Ashley Watkins on or about January 19, 2001?
Yes, sir.
And does Mr. McGarlis' name appear here as one of the people that received this from Jack Palladino?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I want to direct your attention to some certain portions of what you read in the report prepared by Mr. Palladino about the interviews with Ms. Watkins. If I could draw your attention to the yellow portion that's highlighted here on page 1 of McDavid Exhibit 1, it reads, Watkins asked Demetrius what General had told him about a relationship with RK, Robert Kelly, and when it had become sexual intimate. Ultimately, importing your attention to this sentence highlighted in yellow, Watkins then told Demetrius that she had not been sexually intimate with R. Kelly until after her 18th birthday. She then told Demetrius, if you want me to, I could say it happened earlier. I still have the plane tickets. If you're still going to give me the $12,000, I can say it happened earlier. Moving on to the second page, Watkins told us that Demetrius was fine with it right off, and he hardly paused before asking her, would you be fine saying that? So those paragraphs, first, Mr. McDavid, when you found out that someone had told Demetrius Smith that she hadn't had sex with Kelly before she was 18, but she would lie about it to get $12,000, and he was fine with that. How did that impact your thinking about whether people that were making these underage sex claims about Mr. Kelly was honest?
It impacted my mind to the extent that I believe they weren't honest. People now being offered to be paid to lie, and she said she would do it apparently.
Okay. If we continue on, Ms. Watkins reported to Mr. Palladino that she told Demetrius that she would, as long as she was paid. Demetrius then asked Watkins whether she had engaged in any sexual intimate acts with Robert Kelly before she turned 18. He specifically asked about oral sex, which she denied. It then goes on to say a few minutes later, Demetrius telephoned Watkins and told her he had spoken with the attorney and the attorney is fine with it. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you found out that money had been offered to someone to say something about underage sex with Kelly that wasn't true, and now that there is an attorney who is fine with it, how does that impact your view of all these things, these kind of allegations that people were coming at Mr. Kelly with for money?
That they were all false.
Okay. We continue on down. It reads, Demetrius also told Watkins that she should file a police report with the Orlando Police Department the next day. If indeed she needed help, he would go to Orlando and help her complete the report. He suggested that she include in the report that she and Mr. Kelly had engaged in oral sex and that that Robert Kelly had taught her all these dreams and that he had fondled her. After filing the report, Demetrius told her he would give her $10,000. Watkins told Demetrius that she wanted to speak with the unnamed attorney, etc. So sticking with just the yellow part here, he offered to go there after she tells him that none of this is true. When she told Palladino that Smith offered to go to Orlando and help her complete a false police report, what was your reaction to reading that in terms of her thinking about this entire situation?
That this was a setup by Demetrius Smith to get Asti to lie, and it made me believe that none of these allegations could be true.
And this is the same Demetrius Smith that took Tiffany Hawkins to Susan Logan. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now here at the bottom in yellow of Exhibit 1, it says, we advise Watkins to take the attorney's call and tell him the truth about her relationship with Robert Kelly and her willingness to say whatever the attorney wants as long as she got paid. Less than half an hour later, moving on to page 3, Watkins called us again. She had just finished a three-way call with Demetrius and the unnamed attorney, who was patched in with Demetrius through a call feature. Watkins told us that the attorney did not give his name, but she could tell he was black. Okay? And then in the yellow, it says, I told him I wanted to make sure that Demetrius told him about my age, and he understood that I didn't have sex with Robert Kelly until I was 18. But I would say whatever they wanted me to if they paid me. He said it was up to me, and if I do go ahead with it, they'll go along with it. The guy said he would make sure I got paid, but they said I would have to go tomorrow. So when you read about the things that Jack Palladino had been told by Miss Watkins, the defendant's Exhibit 1, after you had seen that, did that significantly impact your opinion about the likelihood that these allegations were being falsified on purpose?
Yes.
And if you could explain for the jury how it impacted your opinion.
Well, first I had to deal with the Tiffany Hawkins situation, which I saw with my own eyes. Now you have alleged witness that's willing to lie for money and is being provoked to do that by Demetrius Smith, for who I know hates Robert at this point. So at this point, the two interactions that I've had both suggest the fact that they are not true.
Now, if I could now turn your attention to the defendant's Exhibit number 2, this was a follow-up that occurred in April of 2000 that you received in April of 2002. Do you recall receiving this from Mr. Margolis as a follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is, again, Jack Palladino following up on these claims about Miss Watkins, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in defendant's Exhibit number 2, does it indicate, first of all, Mr. Palladino indicated that Watkins informed the client, Mr. Kelly, and subsequently Jack Palladino that she had been contacted and offered money in an effort to suborn perjury and bring a false tort against action against Robert Kelly. Watkins was contacted by Demetrius, a 40-ish former Kelly hanger-on, subsequently revealed to be in the employ of Kelly's former manager, Barry Hankerson. Now, right there, when you found out that Demetrius, while he's offering this money, is in the employ of Barry Hankerson, how did that impact your view of these kinds of claims in this situation?
It raised a lot of red flags
Why?
because Barry hated Robert and would do anything he could to destroy Robert. So the fact that he's behind this and is offering money, there is no way I could believe this was true.
And then when it goes on to say that Watkins indicated that Demetrius offered her $10,000 to meet with a Chicago attorney and filed a lawsuit claiming that she had sex with Kelly in the past while underage and held out the expectation that the lawsuit would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to Watkins. And Watkins told Demetrius while that she had dated Kelly as an adult, she had never had sex with him while underage. And so any such statement or lawsuit by her would be false and fraudulent. But nothing deterred Demetrius. Being not deterred, Demetrius told her that the truth did not matter if she filed such a lawsuit. Given the publicity around Kelly at the time, he would settle quickly for hundreds of thousands of dollars, of which Demetrius expected a portion. Now, Mr. McDavid, tell me when you read those words that Miss Watkins had informed Mr. Palladino that Demetrius wanted to get a cut of money that Mr. Kelly would settle because of bad publicity, even if it wasn't a lie, just explain your reaction when you saw, even if it was a lie, just explain your reaction when you saw that.
It made me sick.
Why do you say that?
Because Demetrius and Robert were once friends. I know Demetrius had his issues with Robert, but the fact that he would actually go out and try to get somebody to lie and then take a cut of the money was disgusting to me.
Drawing your attention to page 2 of Defense Exhibit number 2, McDavid 2, yellow portion, after Watkins, in the company of her aunt, told the attorney that the rehearsed false story she had been instructed to tell by Demetrius, she added that that none of it was true. The attorney, apparently not into the fraud, stopped the interview at that point and indicated that under the circumstances she could not, of course, take the case. And then at the bottom, it indicates when Demetrius arrived at the aunt's hotel that evening, she introduced him to Jack Palladino, who explained that Demetrius had been trapped in a sting. When you read that, were you familiar with anything that Jack Palladino had done to memorize Demetrius Smith's efforts?
Yes, I am.
To obtain false claims against Robert Kelly?
I'm sorry?
You're okay? You're fine?
Yes, I am.
What did he do?
He had her wear a wire.
Okay. And drawing your attention also to Defense Exhibit 3, a January 26, 2001 statement of Ashley Watkins. Was this prepared by Mr. Palladino and provided to Mr. Margolis?
Yes, sir.
Was it provided to you?
Yes, sir.
All right. And before we get into the content of it, if we could, look at the first page here. It doesn't appear to be signed here. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But when you got this, was it your understanding that there was actually a written version of this maintained by Jerry Margolis?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if we can show you the typed up version here and have you take a look at it, in the declaration of Ashley Watkins that you reviewed, did you review this around January 26, 2001, shortly thereafter?
Yes, sir.
And in it, it says after the 2000 Sun Times article came out, and that was an article about Mr. Kelly and some sexual allegations, right?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, with the leading.
Mr. McDavid, it's your turn.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
I'll lay the foundation for it.
Judge? Did we lose our judge?
Wait. There is an objection leading. Don't lead.
I won't. Mr. McDavid, first of all, it says after the 12/21/2000 Sun Times article came out, General called me and said he had spoken to Barry Hankerson and there would be $10,000 for me upfront for my testimony. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Now that 12/21/2000 Sun Times article, as you recall, Mr. McDavid was that an article, and I think we'll talk about it later actually, but was that an article that was about public publicity about Mr. Kelly and allegations about sex with underage?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, as to the leading nature of these questions.
He's free to answer yes or no.
Yes
Judge,
or no? Sorry.
Yes or no, Judge, I don't.
Yes or no means it's a leading question, Your Honor.
Actually, that's not true.
Wait. I'll rule, Mr. Brinkley. You don't have to rule.
Thank you.
Overrule. But again, make sure you give him leeway to make his answer.
Of course. Was this an article that was about, and we're going to talk about it later if they're worried about it, but is this an article that was actually about Mr. Kelly and allegations of underage sexual relations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so after an article to that of the nature came out in the Sun Times, and in fact, was it your understanding that part of what was in the article was understanding that, was Tiffany Hawkins' allegation? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so after the article came out, this person, General, called and said he's spoken to Barry Hankerson and had $10,000 for me up front for my testimony. Now, when you read that and saw that Barry Hankerson was putting up this money, how did that impact your view of this entire situation?
It made me very nervous and scared. As far as the allegations were concerned, I knew they weren't true at this point, but it convinced me that Barry was out to destroy Robert.
And then it goes on to say, now, did Robert and Barry have an antagonistic relationship after he was terminated?
Barry claimed that he was owed millions of dollars, roughly $987,000, something like that.
How much of that did he get?
Zero.
Okay. Now, in this statement from Mr. Watkins, it says, I subsequently have been contacted by Demetrius, who also has sought statements from me against Robert Kelly. During January 2001, Demetrius made numerous phone calls to me in which he has offered me $10,000 and then $12,000 to give false evidence under oath against R. Kelly. Demetrius has asked that I testify to having been sexually intimate with R. Kelly while still only 17, despite the fact that I never made such an allegation to Demetrius or anyone else. Specifically denies this allegation to Demetrius and has explicitly stated to Demetrius that any such allegation would be false and a lie. Now, when you are reading this, Mr. McDavid, and you are seeing that Barry Hankerson and Demetrius Smith are offering over $10,000 to someone who to lie explicitly, after you found out that that was going on, how would it be possible for you to view any civil claim of someone claiming for money like this as being true or likely true?
Objection, Your Honor. Objection. That's argument.
The objection is sustained on that. That was pretty leading.
Let me ask you a different way, Mr. McDavid. Then, when you read this, how did that impact your viewpoint of any civil allegations coming in where people are asking for money when you know that this person is telling Jack Palladino that there were people out there offering to pay for lies?
That they would be false.
Turning to the second page of Mrs. Watkins' statement as memorized by Jack Palladino, Demetrius has even attempted to coach me in this lie, suggesting that part of the false allegation, as part of it, and in an effort to make it more credible, I specifically include descriptions of various sexual acts, including oral sex. Although aware that at any time that I was sexually intimate with Kelly before I had turned 18 would be false. Demetrius has offered me a large sum of money at various times, $10,000 to $12,000, to meet with an attorney, falsely claimed that I've been sexually intimate with R. Kelly before the age of 18, and then have the attorney file a lawsuit against R. Kelly on my behalf. Demetrius has told me he expects that R. Kelly will settle such a false claim for hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than endure bad publicity. Mr. McDavid, that last part in particular, that Demetrius told me he expected R. Kelly will settle such claims for hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than endure bad publicity, how did that impact your viewpoint of these civil cases and how they're being handled?
That more people will come forth with false allegations and expect to get hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Now, after having read this and knowing that there was an effort underway by Barry Hankerson and Demetrius Smith to pay for false allegations, what, if any, what was your opinion, generally speaking, about any civil allegations where people just ask for money without going to the police after that?
That they would be false.
Based on what you knew at the time, what other conclusions could you come to?
None.
Why do you say that?
Because the two experiences that I've have both involved people either lying or trying to be bribed. So based on the experience and what I knew at that time, there was no way that I could believe anything that came forward could be true.
Now, after having read, you've had the experience with Hawkins' lawsuit, and you have read Jack Palladino's report regarding Ashley Watkins and her statement in January of 2001. After that, how much involvement did you actually have in these subsequent civil lawsuits?
Little to none.
Okay, and why was that?
Because I was Robert's CPA/business manager. I had a lot of work to do. There was no reason for me to believe these allegations. I hired the best lawyer in the country that I could find, so I let him deal with it. And to the extent that he told me to write checks to settle these things, I listened to him and did it.
Now, after the Watkins incident and the Hawkins lawsuit, did you ever have any reason to change your beliefs about the truthfulness of these claims at that time?
No.
Now, did Jerry Margolis express to you any particular concern or worries after the two of you had been provided with Miss Watkins' statement about Barry Hankerson's involvement in these bribes?
Yes.
What did Mr. Margolis say?
That he believed Demetrius and Barry were on a campaign to destroy Robert. He was extremely concerned about it because Barry had the wherewithal, the means, the money, and his reputation was that he would do anything he had to get what he wanted. So Jerry was very concerned.
In directing your attention to December of 2000, in December of 2000, was there any other incident that you can recall that implicated Barry Hankerson and actually connecting him to issues related to Jane and her family we've heard about in this case?
Yes.
Okay. So in December of 2000, what happened that you were made aware of? Just explain to us how you were made aware of the issue in December of 2000.
Robert called me.
Okay. And what did Robert tell you was going on when he made the call to you in December of 2000?
That his goddaughter, or excuse me, minor one, was being harassed by law enforcement to admit that there was an inappropriate relationship between him and minor one.
Okay, so when Robert said that his goddaughter or minor one or Jane, the names we've heard by, we've heard by we've heard her by, that they were being harassed about an improper relationship between he and Jane. Is that the first you've ever heard of this idea that there was an improper relationship between Robert and Jane?
Yes.
Okay, so in December of 2000, when he said that the police were hassling and harassing Jane's family about this, what, if anything, did you ask Robert at this time?
I had an obligation to ask him, was it true? So I said, is there anything to these allegations?
And will you tell us what Mr. Kelly said in response?
Objection, Your Honor. That's hearsay.
It's not offered for truth, Judge, just for its impact on McDavid.
I'm sorry.
Okay, not for truth, but for impact on Mr. McDavid.
What did Mr. Kelly tell you when you asked him, was there any truth to this?
Are you out of your goddamn mind? This is my granddaughter. Of course, there is no truth to this.
Okay, and at the time, did Robert indicate to you who he believed was responsible for these rumors?
Yes.
And did what he say have an impact on your beliefs about what was going on and what you needed to do?
Yes.
Who did he say was responsible for in his opinion?
Sparkle.
Okay, so who was Sparkle as you understood it at the time?
I believe her real name is Stephanie Edwards. Sparkle was a person that had a personal and professional relationship with Robert. She was an artist. Robert produced an album for her that went platinum. When it came to do the second record, she was dating a guy.
You lost Brandon.
She also had some other producers that she wanted to put on the album. As I mentioned before, Robert is totally self-contained, and he felt like this was his baby, so he didn't. He would not go along with it. He and I fought about it. He would not go along with it. And at the end, I agreed with his position, and she was dropped from the record label.
And after that, how would you characterize the relationship between Sparkle and Robert?
She never sold another album that I can think of, and she hated Robert because she felt as if he destroyed her career.
All right. Now, after the falling out with Robert, who did Sparkle end up working for?
She.
I'm sorry. Objection, Your Honor. If we could get a time frame for when this is happening, please.
Sure. So, do you recall roughly, well, he actually
Okay,
Y'all
you're
hear me?
something's wrong with your phone.
A call came through. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you recall roughly? Well, let me ask it to you this way. You said that Barry Hankerson was fired in 1999 or 2000. This falling out between Robert and Sparkle, did it happen after that or before?
I believe after that.
Okay. And after the year 2000, then who was it? And after she had the falling out with Robert, who was it that Sparkle ended up working for?
One of Barry Hankerson's artists.
And who was it that ultimately tried to that she ultimately tried to get to record to get a record deal with and try to help her get one?
Barry Hankerson.
Okay. And I take it, is this the same Barry Hankerson who was offering the money to get the false claims against Robert Kelly?
Yes, sir.
And I mean, all right. So when you heard that Sparkle might be involved and knew about her connection to Barry, how did that impact your view about this allegation of Robert and Jane that the police had approached them about the Jane family about?
They didn't believe it was true. They didn't believe it wasn't true.
Okay. Now, who did you call after hearing about this from Robert?
Jerry Margolis.
And did you and Jerry just take Robert's word for it when he said no, it wasn't true? Or did Jerry order some investigation?
He had an investigation.
Who did the investigation?
Jack Palladino.
And who did Jack Palladino interview about this to try to find out if there was any truth to these allegations?
Jane and her family.
All right. And did that also occur in January of 2001?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the results of Jack's interview of Jane and her family, were those provided to you?
Yes.
By who?
Jerry Margolis.
And did you review those results?
Yes, sir.
And did those reports that Jack sent to Jerry Margolis or that Jerry Margolis obtained from Jack Palladino and provided to you, did those reports have any substantial impact on your belief about whether there was any truth to the claims of an improper relationship between Robert Kelly and Jane?
Yes, sir.
All right. If you could take a look at this, is going to be Exhibit 4. It's actually Exhibit 4 redacted. If you can't find that there, along with Exhibit 5,
Are you putting it on the screen or do you want me to look at it?
I will. I want you to look at them first. If you could take a look in the book at Exhibit 4 and 5, redacted 4 and 5, the redacted versions are in the tab afterwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recognize redacted 4 and redacted 5?
Hang on a second, please. I'm looking for 5.
Is it me or him?
It says hang on 1 second, please. I'm looking for 5.
I'm looking for 5. Okay, sure.
Yes, sir.
After redacted Exhibit 4 and redacted Exhibit 5 copies of the reports and documents that Jerry McGoldrick provided to you, which were prepared by Jack Palladino regarding interviews with Jane.
Yes, sir.
Did those reports exhibit redacted 4 and 5 impact your specific belief about whether or not there was any truth to a claim of improper relationship between Robert and Jane?
Yes, sir.
And did you review those out around January of 2000, shortly after they were prepared?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, on the same basis of as Exhibit 1, 2, and 3, we offer into evidence. Well, let me ask this first. Exhibit 4 and 5 redacted. Mr. McDavid have the real names of the individuals being removed and replaced with pseudonyms.
Yes, sir. I believe so.
Okay, otherwise, are these fair and accurate copies of the content?
Yes, sir.
All right. For the same logic, we just moved on 1, 2, and 3. Judge, we moved into evidence Exhibit 4 and 5 redacted.
What page is it on? Because I think the judge is lost.
20, 26, 25,
No, what page?
31, 25.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Judge, you need to pay attention.
31, 25, line 21.
Did the judge go to sleep?
No, I found it.
Oh, okay.
They're admitted. Defendants Exhibit 4 and 5 redacted were received in evidence.
Thank you. Mr. McDavid, I'm now going to draw your attention first to Exhibit 4 redacted. I'm going to draw your attention first to the top of Exhibit 4 redacted.
I'm sorry, Miss Brentley. Your phone is back muffled again. It was fine before, and now it's muffled again. Sorry.
Okay, let me see. Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. Mr. McDavid, I'm now going to draw your attention to first to Exhibit 4 redacted. I'm going to draw your attention first to the top of Exhibit 4 redacted. Under the date, there is a name of a lawyer. Can you identify who that is?
Daniel Tucci.
Okay. And can you explain for the jurors who Daniel Tucci was and what his role was?
Daniel Tucci was Jane and her family's attorney.
And did Daniel Tucci work directly with Jerry Margolis on these issues?
Yes.
All right. Now, when you receive Exhibit 4 redacted from Jerry Margolis, I'm going to draw your attention specifically to page 3 of that document. First of all, it indicates that the family recalled an event in the spring of 1999 when someone from DCFS came to their residence and conducted an interview with Jane in presence of her mother, father, maternal grandparents, Leroy and Sadie Edwards. The DCFS agent asks, has R. Kelly ever felt of you? Have you ever been alone with R. Kelly? Has R. Kelly ever made you feel uncomfortable? To each of these questions, Jane replied no. Now, when you read Jack Palladino's report of Jane's family telling him that these were the responses that Jane gave in the presence of her mom and dad and her grandparents, Mr. McDavid, how did that impact your thinking about whether or not Robert's statement that it was not true and it was made up by Sparkle? How did that impact your thinking about Robert's statement?
It reinforced what I thought, that there was nothing to it.
Okay, and why?
She denied it to law enforcement.
And?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Let's take a look at some of the other things that Mr. Palladino reported about this interview with Jane and her family. The parents, the male social worker explained to the parents that he had to follow up on an anonymous call from someone who stated that the parents had been warned about Kelly's improper actions with Jane, knew about the improper relationship between Kelly and Jane, were allowing improprieties to take place between Kelly and Jane. The anonymous caller also stated that Jane had slept with R. Kelly on his tour bus. Jane added that she has never toured with Kelly, and when she was on the tour bus, she was with her godmother, Kelly's wife. Brandon and Susan, Jane's parents, stated that they had never been warned by anyone about improper acts by Kelly with anyone, much less with their daughter Jane. So when you saw that there was an anonymous complaint and the content of which had been denied by the parents as they reported it to Jack Palladino, Mr. McDavid, how does that impact your view of whether Robert Kelly was having an improper relationship with Jane?
It reinforced the fact that it wasn't true.
Mr. Palladino continued on page 4 of this report to talk about what he was told by Jane's family about Chicago police inspectors who came out, who explained they had to investigate because R. Kelly is so high profile, asked the same questions as the DCFS investigated, and received the same negative response from Jane. They pressed Jane, as reported to Palladino, by repeatedly asking, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" So when you saw here that she was pressed and continued to say no, what did that say to you, Mr. McDavid?
Two things. One, that I believe that is what she said, and it was the truth. And number two, the Chicago police never spoke to me. They never spoke to Mr. Kelly. They never spoke to his lawyers. They never spoke to anyone on his side. And I would think that if they had any thoughts in their mind that any of this was true, that they would have contacted Robert Kelly or someone, but that never happened.
Mr. Palomino goes on to explain that the family reported 2 weeks later DCFS agents called and told the family he had found nothing amiss and was closing the investigation. Did that impact your views?
Yes, sir.
Explain how.
They obviously must have felt there was nothing to it. They closed the investigation, which meant there was nothing to it. It further reinforced that over and over again, Jane and her family were making the same statements, that nothing had happened. This was not true.
During the page 5 of Jack Palladino's report on page 5, he takes about further interviews of Jane's family about this December of 2000 visit with the Chicago Police Department. The officers state that they had been ordered to come out by their superior because they had been on the receiving end of daily calls from a female caller demanding that something be done about R. Kelly-Jane relationship or I'm going to the press. First of all, that particular paragraph, when you heard that there is basically calls made by some female caller threatening to go to the press, what came into your mind?
Sparkle.
Why?
Because she hated Robert. Somebody is calling daily. It's anonymous. At that time, I don't know who else it could have been.
Okay. And Jane's family went on to report that. In addition to the expected questions about improper touching by Kelly, being alone with Kelly, and being made uncomfortable by Kelly, and to all of which Jane continued to reply no, the police investigator asked whether Jane knew Tiffany Hawkins, and Jane said no. First of all, so you've seen in 1999, there was this conversation between DCFS where Jane said nothing happened. Now you are reading that the family reported to Jack Palladino that they came back now in December of 2000, and Jane continued to reply no. So knowing now there have been two separate incidents.
Objection, Your Honor.
I haven't finished my question.
Wait.
We can just ask the question. We're summarizing what has already been read here.
Judge, I'm just trying to get to the question here. So you already seen that there has been a 19.
Your Honor, can we get a ruling on the objection, please?
Wait, I'm trying to let me see what the question was. Hold on a minute.
I hadn't got to finish it yet, was the problem.
Overruled. You can complete your question.
Thank you. So having seen that in 1991, the family reported to Palladino that Jane said no to all these questions, and now seeing in December of 2000, she's reporting no to separate groups of investigators. How does that impact your mindset about the truth of any of this? Just that part. We'll get to the other part in a minute.
It led me to the same conclusion I already had reached, that there was no truth to these allegations. She denied it over and over again. Her parents have denied it over and over again. And nobody have ever talked to Robert about it from the police department.
So then when it goes to indicate, Jane's family indicate police investigators asked whether Jane knew Tiffany Hawkins. Jane responded she never met her. What did that reference to Tiffany Hawkins, what did that do to your thinking? Or how did that impact your thinking about this entire situation?
That made it very clear to me who was behind all of this.
Who?
Barry Hankerson.
And how could you tell that by the reference to Hawkins?
Because in 1997, the people in the room, to the best of my knowledge, was Hawkins, her lawyer, John Toohey, myself, Jerry Margolis, and Barry Hankerson. That's me. Sorry.
So saying that those were the only people in the room for the Hawkins deposition, the reference to the police to Tiffany Hawkins and asking Jane about her, how did that point to you to Barry Hankerson?
Because Barry hated Robert. Nobody else knew about Tiffany Hawkins. How else could this come out?
Okay.
Unless it was out of Barry's mouth.
And so when you now see further evidence that Barry Hankerson is indeed, in your view, behind this, what does that tell you about how much credence you could give to any of these allegations about Jane and Robert?
None.
Mr. Palomino went on to report that according to Susan Jane's mother, the officer also asked for her sister Stephanie Sparkle Everett's last name and current address. So after seeing the Hawkins portion, which directed you to Barry, the fact that they asked for Sparkle's last name, how did that impact your view of this entire situation?
It made me believe that the police thought that Sparkle was the one making the phone calls, the harassing phone calls, and the constant stirring up of this whole thing.
Okay. At the end of the police review, Jane's family reported to Palladino. The police told the family that they would file a report concluding that the allegations were unfounded, but stressed that in the face of such accusations, they had to go. They had no choice but to go out and interview Jane. Seeing that the December of 2000 police were finding this unfounded, what impact did they have on your view of the situation?
That it wasn't true.
Why does the fact that they made an unfounded finding impact your thoughts?
Well, this is now the second time the police have investigated this with Jane and her family, and this is the second time that they found it unfounded. And also, they never talked to Robert or any of the representatives, so that in itself made me believe there was nothing to this.
Okay. Now on page 6, Mr. Palladino reports what the family told him about Sparkle, and what he said, or what he reported about what he was told by the family, is Sparkle, who R. Kelly produced first album with platinum in 1998, began work on her second album with Kelly about February of 1999, until a bitter break took place between Sparkle and Kelly over Sparkle's insistence that her new boyfriend, Chicago record producer Steve Huff, produced several of the songs on her second album. The family described Sparkle as bitter that they did not rally to her side in her dispute with Kelly, and they have remained friends with him. Seeing that those things had been said to Mr. Palladino by Sparkle's sister, again, Jane's mom and dad, Sparkle's sister being her mom, what did that impact your view of Sparkle's involvement and the legitimacy of any such allegation at that time?
That Sparkle not only had a vendetta against Jane, but her family also. And it again reinforced the fact that I could not believe this.
Sorry. Turning your attention to Defendant's Exhibit 5 redacted, is Defense Exhibit 5 Jack Palladino's typed up version of a handwritten declaration by Jane?
Yes.
Okay. And when you received it and reviewed it in January of 2001, did you see that there was a handwritten declaration that had been typed up here in the last paragraph?
Yes.
And so reading Jane's declaration as follows: I have been the subject of false, vicious rumors of an improper relationship with Robert. I have been questioned twice, in the spring of 1999 and in December of 2000 by Chicago police, and once 1999 by DCFS. And each time the investigators have told my family they found nothing improper. They, my parents, were present on each of these occasions, and they and I cooperated fully, and I answered every question asked. Robert Kelly has never had sexual intercourse with me or touched me improperly or displayed himself to me improperly or made me feel uncomfortable in his company. Any statement by anyone to the contrary to a lie. Seeing those words as agreed to in a statement by Jane, a handwritten statement.
Objection, Your Honor. This does not say it was agreed to by Jane. He's mischaracterizing what Jack Palladino has written.
Okay, well, fine.
Judge, wake up.
I'm up. Okay, the objection is sustained. It's an improper characterization.
I'll correct it. In the last paragraph, it says, I have given this 2-page written declaration to Allison Kane without permission or reward or threat or coercement. When you read that, was it your understanding what was your understanding, Mr. McDavid, about where the context of this came from?
From a 2-page handwritten statement made by Jane.
Okay. And so when you read what you believe to be a statement from Jane saying that none of these things were ever happened, and anybody saying anything to the contrary is a lie, in January of 2001, what, if any, reason did you have to disbelieve her?
None.
Okay, we hear something in the background.
Okay, and when she went on to say, as reported by Mr. Palladino, I believe the source of these rumors must be someone very angry with Robert Kelly, who does not care that these false rumors have caused me and my family pain. Who did you immediately think in your mind she was referring to?
Sparkle.
So as of January 2001, after having the matter investigated by Mr. Palladino, what was your belief about whether or not Robert Kelly told you the truth when he denied an improper relationship with Jane?
I believed him.
Now, after that was an article, we talked about this we talked about this a minute ago. Was an article published in the Sun Times in December of 2000.
Yes.
And was that an article that referenced, is it your understanding, a recollection that that article referenced a DCFS investigation?
Yes, sir.
And did you know when you read that article what they were talking about?
Yes, sir.
And okay, and at the time that article came out, what, if any, documents were you provided with by Jerry Margolin that was connected to this article?
A letter from her lawyers.
Okay, so Jerry Margolin sent you a letter that was written by whose lawyer?
I'm sorry, minor one's lawyer, Daniel Tui.
So James' lawyer.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, did you review that letter?
Yes, sir.
Did the contents of that letter itself provide you further reinforcement or support for your beliefs about whether there was an improper relationship between Robert and Jane?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you read this around the time it was written in February of 2001?
Yes, sir.
If you could turn your attention to Defendant's Redacted Exhibit 6,
Yes, sir.
is the Defendant's Redacted 6 a copy of the letter that you reviewed around February of 2001, written by James' lawyer
Yes.
to the Chicago Sun-Times?
Yes.
And did your review of this letter further reinforce and support your opinion regarding Robert Kelly and whether or not he was telling you the truth?
Yes.
Okay. For the same basis as 1 through 5, we offer into evidence Defendant Exhibit 5 and 6.
Your Honor, we object this as to authenticity as we can discuss off the record, Your Honor, I mean at sidebar.
Judge, let me ask a couple more foundational questions to make sure it's clear.
All right.
Have you reviewed Defendant's Redacted 6 in its entirety before your testimony today?
Yes, sir.
And is Defendant's Redacted 6 a copy of the document provided to you by Jerry Margolis as authored by Dan Tooley?
Yes.
And did you read documents Defendant's Redacted 6 or a copy thereof back around February of 2001?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And is this letter, Defendant's Redacted 6, I'm showing you, the same letter that you were shown by Jerry Margolis back in February of 2001?
That's correct.
At this point, Judge, I think foundation is sufficient. We offer Redacted 6.
Your Honor, the government objects.
Okay. Overruled. Defendant's Exhibit Redacted 6 was received into evidence.
All right. Take a look now at Defendant's Exhibit Redacted 6, Mr. McDavid. If we could take a look at some of the highlighted portions. Mr. Tui writes that he's retained to represent Jane and her family. And he indicates about the article on December 21st, 2000. In that article, you made false and defamatory statements concerning my client that injured them, and they are continuing to injure them. Specifically, the following false and defamatory statement appear in your article. Chicago police have twice investigated allegations that Mr. Kelly was having sex with an underage female, but dropped the investigation because the girl would not cooperate. The nature and obvious implications are false and defamatory. Jane has never had any sexual encounter with Mr. Robert Kelly, and she has at all times fully cooperated with the Chicago police. In the spring of 1999 and again in December 2000, Jane met with Chicago police officers along with her parents and fully and completely answered all of their questions. She has denied having any type of form of sexual encounter with Robert Kelly. The police investigators were not were not dropped due to a lack of cooperation from Jane or her family. Rather, the police investigations were ultimately dropped as there was no evidence to substantiate the anonymous complaints that Robert Kelly was having sex with Jane. Now, when you read this statement, when you read this statement written to the Sun-Times by Jane's lawyer, what impact did seeing it written from the lawyer have on you?
It further reinforced what I had already been told and heard countless number of times. It's now coming from her lawyer.
And the fact that her lawyer is writing, what did that suggest to you? What did that suggest to you?
Well, based
Let me see if I can make my question as clear as possible. When you see that the lawyer is writing this to the Chicago Sun-Times, what did that suggest to you about Jane's conversation with her lawyer?
Objection, Your Honor.
that they were.
Objection as to the form. It's argumentative.
No, it's not argumentative. Overruled.
What did seeing this written from? What did seeing this written from the lawyer? What did that indicate to you about Jane's conversation with her lawyer?
That she obviously told her attorney the same thing that she has said countless times over and over.
And then when you read in her, when you read in her how, I'm supposed to be here, how she had fully cooperated, but the sometimes had written the opposite, that there was a lack of cooperation, and that Mr. Tui says that this is false and defamatory. When you read that, how did that impact your view of sometimes reporting as it related to Robert Kelly?
I was disappointed that a news outlet was published something that was obviously a lie in the newspaper, and it seemed that they were just trying to be sensationalizing this entire event, and they were trying to sell newspaper. They weren't. They weren't interested in the truth, or they wouldn't have written that.
So what did that experience with reading Dan Tui's letter about this December 2000 incident with Jane's family, what did that experience suggest to you about how much faith or trust you could put into sometimes reporting about Robert Kelly?
None.
All right, let me ask you this, Mr. McDavid. At the time that these allegations that Mr. Kelly brought to your attention that there were these anonymous allegations, Jack Palladino went out and interviewed and investigated. At that time, did you make any effort to hire a criminal lawyer?
No.
Why not?
There was no need to.
Why do you say that?
Jane denied it. Her parents denied it over and over and over again. There was no basis to hire a criminal lawyer. Everybody believed what they were saying.
Now, the combination of Palladino investigation results, the combination of Ashley Watkins' interview with the Jane and her family's interview, when you look at those together in January of 2001, what did you take away from the totality of what you were provided and what you believe?
There was absolutely no truth to any of this. Every statement, every report, every lawyer's letter, all the same thing. She denied it. Her parents denied it.
And how did the combination of that with the if all did the combination of that with the Ashley Watkins investigation about the money for false statements, how did that combine to impact your thinking?
That this was some grandiose plan by Barry Hankerson to destroy Robert Kelly.
And did you think you had good reason to believe that after reviewing all these documents?
Absolutely.
Is this a good time to take an afternoon recess?
Sure.
We'll take 15 minutes. Recess.
All right, guys. Thank you. We're going to take a recess.
And scene.
And scene.
I'm sleepy, y'all. So
Mhm.
Ooh, you ain't the
everybody.
only one.
Brandon, what do you think about this now? Now that you read this,
Say it again.
what do you think about this case now? Now that you read this,
Not to reiterate the words of my character, but over and over again, we just been hearing the same exact things, like, just falsification of information, just bribery, just sneakiness and underhanded every chance that they can. And to me, in my opinion, I think I like last time, I spoke on here, I told you that the conspiracy of these things, they grow so high and they go so low of our understanding that we wouldn't believe how many people are in it. And this kind of sounds like everybody's in it. Anybody and everybody that could be in it, that has any control over this case is in it. Just from my opinion, I ain't said that. That's just what it feels like.
like they were all in cahoots with each other, taking this man money, right?
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
What about you? What do you think, Dal?
I agree. I agree with Brandon said. It just seems like one person didn't get the money they wanted, and then they were pissed off. Like that is just after that, it was just they were ready for blood. They wanted to come back and just destroy him, basically. Because even when he said the police never reached out to them, and they never spoke to his lawyers, that itself just shows that the police knew that this is not something that we're going to even bother to get into. It's like they took it to another length of going to the news, and it's like they had their own tactic on how to make sure that R. Kelly was going to go under. Like this, it was all set up, it seems like.
All right. Anybody else have any thoughts? And before I go, what about you? Perspective. I know you have a lot to say.
Shut up. Nope, I don't have nothing to say this time.
You
She said, I know
lying.
you have a lot to
You
say.
lying, perspective. We know you got something to say.
No, I'm shutting up for real. I'm boycotting. Y'all
Why?
know
Say how you feel. We need to know.
No, I mean, this is reinforced. Uh-oh.
Reinforcement. What
My
we
phone.
already knew, right? It's like reinforcement of what we already felt and knew.
Exactly. This is what we already felt, what we already knew. It's just being solidified. And I'm happy that we're able to read it and hopefully get it out to more people so they can see too.
But I'm just hoping that the jury make the right decision because this is a lot of bull.
I'm happy that I'm getting to listen to, thank you, Sylvia, to the transcripts because there's a lot more in here than what the reporters
I
told.
I keep telling people that this is
And I'm loving that the judge is like overruled. He want to hear the story.
yeah, it's
And the
crazy.
fact that there was no minors. The girl did not sleep with Mr. Kelly. It was a lie. They was lying, and she said it all those times, all those investigations. She said that she wrote it down, so they knew that girl wasn't in that tape. And now, all of a sudden, now in 2019, all of a sudden now she's in the tape because now she got all this stuff, Section 8 and all of that.
And it's not only because she got Section 8, it's because he already went through the first he already went through trial. All these things were coming out against him. They probably thought he didn't have a chance. So it was like she was already losing him. And then she's getting Section 8. She's getting vacation. She's getting these things from the federal government.
And you also remember she filed bankruptcy in 2018. She broke.
Mm-hmm. So
Man,
desperate situations.
you're getting on my nerve. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you to my two new readers. I had to twist arms and bend backwards and all that. But anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm going to bed. I'm sleepy.
Good night.
I got to go to the court in the morning. I see you guys. Because look, I won't be here no more. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.